What is the first thing you want to know?
The first thing I want to know is how do you determine how many tweets per day or per week, or how do you break it down so that you get a good balance between not over tweeting and not under tweeting and making work of your time?
Yeah. So it's funny because in thinking about this question, it seems like a very simple question, right? How often should you tweet a day? Oh, 4 times a day. Okay, good. On to the next question. It seems like a simple question, but it's really not. So let's start here. I think first, the premise that you need to tweet every day, period. Forget how many times a day. People will ask me all the time, do I really need to tweet every day in the first place? What if I don't have something to say every day? Like, how necessary is it? And I do think that it's relatively necessary. I think consistency is really important for multiple reasons. Number one, I think it's important for you as the person tweeting. You need those reps. You'll get better at it. You'll learn more about what resonates with your audience. It's important for your audience to hear from you more than once in a blue moon. I think that consistency keeps you top of mind for them. And it's also really important in terms of the algorithm, right? If you're
Yeah.
tweeting consistently, Twitter's algorithm is more likely to show your stuff to your followers as long as you're sharing stuff that they like and engage with and that kind of thing. Because when Twitter's deciding what to show in people's feeds, they're, as all social platforms are, those algorithms are looking for how closely connected are you to the person that's tweeting. So if I'm only tweeting once in a blue moon, even if you engage with most of my tweets, you're not going to be as closely connected to me as you are with someone who you're engaging with on a daily basis, right? So it's going to be
Right.
tougher for me to get into your feed. So let's start there with the idea that yes, you should be tweeting every day in some capacity. The other thing I would say is, and this is not only true of Twitter, but I think it's true of any, not just social platform, but really anything you're going to do, right? That you're going to try, if you're trying to get value out of something, I would say if you're not willing to commit at least 5 minutes a day to anything you do, how can you really expect to succeed? Not
For
just
sure.
with Twitter, but with anything. And maybe that time is batched, right? And maybe you spend an hour a week or a half hour a week or whatever, but the equivalent of at least a 5 minute a day investment. So all that said, yes, I think you should at least post once a day. Do I think you should post at least once a day? Yes. Is there a magic number of how many tweets you should post a day? No. So I don't mean to dodge the question, but I'm going to dodge the question a little bit. And I would say there's a few different reasons for this. So one is you ultimately need both quantity and quality, right? That's another thing people always ask about. What if I don't have that much to say? Am I better just tweeting random stuff? And they ask me what's more important, quantity or quality? And my answer is always yes.
That
My answer is both,
balance, right?
right? Quantity, because you need a volume of tweets, because that's how you, like I said before, that's how you learn what works. It's how you get better. And it's how you ultimately reach more of your audience. You need quality tweets because every tweet you post is an audition. Every time you post a tweet, someone could go, I don't want to follow this guy anymore. Also, if you post garbage that people don't engage with, they're less likely to see your future tweets. So every quote unquote bad tweet, and by bad, I mean something that people just ignore, lessens the likelihood that they're going to see your next tweet. Every tweet's an
Right.
audition, right? So the truth is you need both quantity and quality. But let's zoom out here, because I think the question itself, which is a common question, I'm not criticizing the question, but the question itself, the idea of how many times a day should I tweet, which I actually think also falls into the bucket of what time of day should I tweet, and all these things about the nuts and bolts of how to tweet. I think it highlights a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have about Twitter, right? That they think the key to unlocking value on Twitter is your tweets, what you tweet. That seems obvious, right? If I tweet the right amount of times, if I tweet at the right time, if I tweet X, Y, and Z, that's how I'm going to get value. But the truth is, what you tweet is only one of 4 ways that you get value from. There's your tweets, your replies, there's what you consume, and there's direct messages. I think all of these are relatively equal in importance, but a lot of people focus just on the what do I tweet, right? To really succeed on the platform, you need to do all 4 of those things consistently. And here's why. And here's how I view each piece as working and the quote unquote value you get from each of them. Tweeting allows you to provide value to your audience and establish your expertise. That's relatively obvious. If you're not putting anything out there of your own, nothing's gonna, basically. Replying allows you to get in front of new audiences, especially when you don't have a big following. So you'll usually don't have a big following, get a lot more impressions from a reply to someone else than you will your own. It also allows you to become part of a relevant community. So if you're focused on side hustles and on minimalist entrepreneur type stuff, the other people that are talking about that, there is a community out there that exists talking about that. And if
Yeah.
you're replying to those people, you very quickly become seen as a part of that community. You can't do that if you're just off on your own posting, whether you're posting 1 tweet a day or 20 tweets a day.
You
If
won't
you're
find
just in
it.
your own sort of silo, you're not joining that community. The third piece, consuming, I actually think in some ways can be the most valuable part of Twitter. You can learn so much if you're following the right people who are relevant to what you want to do, right? So I actually view figuring out how to fine tune, and I'll get into this more in a minute, but figuring out how to fine tune who you follow so that your information feed is really valuable can ultimately help and grow and improve your business way more than maybe something that you tweet. And then the fourth element is direct messaging. And direct messaging allows you to build your network and individual relationships with people, both people who are connected to you and people who maybe you would like to be connected to. So the difference I see between, and there is some overlap here between replying and direct messaging, but the difference that I see is replying, I think of as because it's public in a public space with everyone else, it's a little more sort of a community play. I'm a part of this community. Whereas a direct message is that one to one, and I'm building an individual relationship with this person. And again, the key with all of these things, tweeting, replying, consuming, and direct messaging, is it's about providing value. It's not, and building sort of authentic relationships. It's not about just promoting your stuff. If people I DM 10 people a day and ask them to buy my product or subscribe to my newsletter. That's not exactly what I mean. So to bring it kind of full circle to your original question of how often should you tweet per day, I actually think that ideally you would do each of those four things that I just said at least once per day. So you would tweet at least once per day. You would reply at least once per day. You would consume or fine tune what you're consuming in some way at least once per day. You would browse your feed, or maybe you identify a few key people that you want to every day see what they're tweeting. And you would direct message at least one person a day about something interesting, valuable in some way to take that step to build an individual relationship. I think if you're doing, and we'll talk about how much time this can take or not in another one of your questions. It may sound like a lot, but I actually don't think it's necessarily that much of a time commitment. If you're doing those four things on a daily basis, you're going to make progress and you're going to get a lot of value out of Twitter. So I'm curious your reaction to all of that. Does that make sense? Any questions come up about that for you?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Currently, I tweet every single day. I have for probably about 2 years or so now, and I reply consistently, and not just to people that reply to my tweets, but find people within the community that I deal with a lot, including your tweets, obviously. So the one thing that I haven't definitely been using to my advantage are DM. I respond to every single DM I get, but I'm not very proactive in DMing people. And I'm
Yep.
guessing that's something that I could definitely add. And
Yep.
and the third thing you mentioned about fine tuning what I consume, that's been something that's been on my mind a lot lately because I believe you tweeted maybe about a week ago. I paraphrasing the tweet, but basically, if you're just following a bunch of anonymous accounts, you're not getting the most out of the platform. And it made me rethink and go through it. And a lot of these anonymous accounts, I know the creators behind them, but there was a lot that I was following that I had no idea. And honestly, the content wasn't very helpful. Originally, when I first started on Twitter, I was very into the growth networks. It definitely helped the numbers portion of it, but not the social relationship
Yeah.
portion of it. So I was looking to you a lot for advice on how to grow the social relationships, which I think are much more
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah. They're really powerful. And it's crazy because people get caught up on quote unquote follower growth and audience growth. But the truth is, like, one or two relationships with the right people can have a massive impact on both your audience growth and your business, everything that you're doing. This is a perfect example, right? Our relationship that we have struck through engaging on Twitter and email and that kind of stuff is leading to you being on this podcast, which is then going to go out in my newsletter to 20,000 people. It's going to get you subscribers. And in theory, my assumption is you will get more subscribers and attention from this than you would have gotten from a lot of tweets or whatever. And I found that for myself too. And I was late in figuring this out, but how powerful those relationships are and what an amazing tool and platform Twitter is to form those. Because you mentioned that you haven't done a lot of DMs, I'll give you a couple suggestions or just random ideas of like ways you can do that. Cause I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I have to do that, but I don't know what to say or how, especially to people they don't know. Oh, I'd love to have a relationship with this person, but I can't just DM them and be like, hey, let's have a relationship. So a couple things that you can do. One is sometimes things that you might typically reply to, right? You see someone's tweet about something, you have something to say that would be an interesting reply or relevant experience or whatever. You could just do it as a DM. So maybe you lose the exposure to the community, but you go, hey, I saw that you did this thing. I tried this. Let's say someone's asking about, hey, what's a good tool for managing your newsletter or whatever. The instinct would be, oh, I'll just reply, but which is fine and good. But you also could send them a DM separately and go, hey, I use this tool and it was really good. Or, hey, I saw a bunch of people recommending this tool and I didn't want to trash it publicly, but just so you know, I use that tool and it sucks. So you're providing value, but it's giving you an excuse to start an engagement, a conversation. Another thing you can do is when you see someone do something, asking them a question that dives a little deeper into it. So someone says, I said a record course launch or whatever it is. You could DM them and go, hey, congratulations on the course launch. I was just wondering, what do you think was the most important thing that you did differently? So that I'm going to dive deeper in a question. It's about, and they might answer, they might not, but I think most times they probably will. The other thing you could do is you could DM people. If there's someone you want to connect with who you know is interested in a topic, people's instinct is to promote their own stuff to them. But if you promote some other thing that isn't yours, it's not self-promotional. So if you know that I'm into newsletter growth and you come across something that you didn't create, but not that there's anything wrong with promoting your own stuff too. But if you come to me and say, hey, I just listened to this podcast, I have nothing to do with it, but I thought this was an amazing conversation about newsletter growth. I thought you might like it. That's again, a sort of conversation starter.
Yeah.
So those are different ways to do it.
Yeah, it brings me back to an example. There used to be a community manager over at the Tilt. His name was Heath, and he would send me DMs of, hey man, I know you're into this. Watch this, and it would just make me think so highly of him. And he stuck out of everybody else at DMing because he wasn't promoting any of being on his own. It wasn't an affiliate link. It was nothing like that. It was just so helpful, and that helped build that relationship.
Exactly. And the other thing you can do too is you can, in your tweets and stuff with your own audience and in your newsletter, you can let it be known that, because a lot of times other people out there who may be in your audience or read your stuff, but don't necessarily, they might be intimidated to DM you because they're like, I don't really know him and he's not going to answer. So just putting it out there of, hey, you're welcome to message me if you have any questions or if you want to know anything, or I'd love to you can invite people to tell you about their thing. What's your side hustle right now? I'd love to hear about it. And people will do that. Cool.